What's
Yeah,
up?
thanks. Hello.
Hello, hello.
How's it going?
We are doing well, thank you. How are you?
All good, all good. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. I agree. I agree. Apologies, I'm a touch late. I forgot this was my Zoom link, and so realized that everyone was waiting for me. So apologies. But got to chat to new members and get everyone involved. Um, Anywho, just making sure we got Roger and Rob here. Hey, Rob. Cool. Hey, Hermione, Graham, Peter, Sarah. Very nice to see you. We've got some people's note takers. I don't know about that, but there we are. Don't think there's much we can do about this, is there? I don't know, Peter, you might be able to tell me. There's no way to sort of like kick out people's random note takers if they're not here.
Yeah, you should be able to kick them out.
Yeah.
So I think you just boot them out like a regular person.
Boot them.
Okay. Also, sorry, before I do this, is this someone here's note taker? The CNITs, Chorus AI, and Fireflies AI?
The Firefly one is Mary. I assume that's Mary from Odin. But Mary's not in the call.
Yeah, no, that's not allowed, I'm afraid.
Cheating a bit.
It's quite a good system there, right? Send someone on your behalf.
I've never seen that done before by someone not here. I thought it was like,
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so I think AJ, if you just click the triple dots next to them, I think you have the power to kick them out.
I'm doing exactly that. Yeah, cool.
Some real-time tech support from Roger there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what I do, is like show people how to use Zoom.
Let me quickly post this link as well, just in the Telegram. So we had a good amount of people on there. In the meantime, given that we've got quite a nice small crowd, we could do a very short icebreaker. Well, actually, wait, before I do this, apologies. Rob and Roger, this isn't your session, not mine at all. So tell me if there's a second for that or not.
Well, I mean, we can easily fill the whole hour, but I mean, it's entirely up to you. If you would like to do a quick icebreaker, then we can do a quick icebreaker.
Let's do a quick icebreaker. I think it's always very nice. Fans about connecting. Let's connect some people. Cool. Let us think. This is quite technical. It's quite business focused. So let's touch on the personal. Does we'll go around the room and say, what's the largest sort of personal goal? I don't really like the word goal, but I'll use it in this context. What's the largest personal goal you have for this year, or have had in the past 6 months, or have in the following 6 months? I'll start with myself. For those of you that I have seen in the past 6 months, you'll have heard me not shut up about this big triathlon that I'm doing. It's been all consuming for the past 12 months. And it is 6 weeks away, and I'm very scared because it's very long. It's a 12.5-hour race, non-stop exercise. It's just going to be daunting. Anyway, I'm going to then go around my screen, and Drew, you were in first. Drew, have you got a personal goal that you've had in the past 6 months or have for the next 6 months?
Yeah, so my personal goal is being in startup land, you know how hard it is to get a mortgage. So actually now being a few years in, my goal was to be a homeowner. So I'm currently going through the motions of completing on the property that I live in with my partner. So yeah, that's the personal goal. So thumbs up.
Yeah, when you get to my age, you kind of have covered a lot of the personal goals already. Got the house, exited the business, all that stuff. Everything's pretty stable, so I'm pretty happy about that. I I do spend a lot of time campaigning and lobbying for more progressive taxation. So I'd like to make sure my group makes some more tangible progress in that. And I've got a personal trip coming up in September where I'm going to spend a couple of weeks with a really close friend of mine in the US, do a road trip with him. He's had some health issues, which are kind of under control now, but it'd be a good chance to reconnect with him. And my son is going to join, one of my sons, for half the journey. So yeah, looking forward to that, enlightenment.
Amazing. Thank you, Shane. Sarah? You're on mute, Sarah. So,
There we go. Just realised I've got 2 personal goals. Nicorette chewing gum, stopping that random smoking thing. But being the age slightly more mature than the average founder, my goal over the last 6 months has been to rebuild muscle, lost because of being older. I hate that word. So building my muscles.
Wow.
very toned, I have to say. So it's working.
So far, so good.
Hermione, what about you?
I just had to look back at what my goals for the year were that I wrote down in January. It's not a good sign, is it? Some of them I was doing well on, but the real one is improving my French, given that I live in France and have not spent nearly enough mental energy on time learning French. I'm not doing so well on it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Conscious of time as well, so we're going to rattle through people. If you can keep it quite succinct, that'd be amazing. Peter, go next.
Making a bunch of money, like just that, making a bunch of money.
Nice, love that.
Honesty. Love.
Ian, are you with us? Yeah.
Yeah, hi there. I think I've now got a bit more free time, which I need to, so my goal is to fill it really constructively with a combination of figuring out what's next for me professionally, along with improving German, getting to know lots of people in Munich, and getting more embedded here after a while of constantly having my mind on London. That's the succinct version.
Amazing. Cool. Thanks, Ian. Martin? Oh, I can't hear you, Martin. You are on mute, but I'm not sure what's going on. Might come back to you in a second then, Martin, if that's okay. Dan, you were next, but I don't know if you're still eating or not.
I am, but you don't. I can speak. My main goal was to basically tie everything together, because I had lots of loose ends, like not having a house ready and all that kind of stuff, and make the businesses that I run sustainable, get them to a good place, and don't burn out. Pretty much that, like try and avoid burning out, considering I have like lots of stuff, lots of big stuff going on, like all at the same time this year, and I think it's going okay. I think I'm kind of managing a good healthy balance, all things considered.
Amazing. Cool. Thank you for sharing. And Laura, any in a succinct one line, any personal goals that you have had or have for this year?
Oh, good question. So 2 seconds. I need to think about that. Is anyone else left to go? Or is it just me?
It's mainly you, but feel free
Okay.
to put it in the chat if you'd rather.
Personal goal to do with the business or personal life? Sorry, I missed the context.
Personal, not business.
Personal. Move house.
Amazing.
I need to move out of my flat. I need a garden and some stairs. I'm done living in flats. I've done it now for 10 years. I need a grown-up house.
Incredible. Love that. Thank you so much. Cool. I know we have a couple more people, but I'm going to hand over the reins because I've dominated too much of the session already. So without further ado, Rob and Roger from Rational Partners, who are members and partners of the community. They have an amazing consultancy, which they will tell you about. But this session is really impactful. They've run it at the past 3 events, and it's always been highly subscribed and extremely impactful for everyone who's attended. So over to you guys.
Thanks, AJ. So hi, everybody. Lots of familiar faces. some friends and clients, some new folks. It's great to see everybody. As AJ mentioned, we've run this session a couple of times at founders retreats now. And so we find it to be really useful, really powerful. I have a bit of a presentation. Where did it go? Just to kind of run through what we're going to do. And I can't screen share, so that's cool. Just a little bit of background about us. So we're Rational Partners. There's me, Roger, and a bunch of other CTO and CPOs. And we come in whenever people need kind of C-level help. So we're tech and product leadership practice. And we come in and we do fractional and interim CPO engagement. We do advisory, we do due diligence, stuff like that. So we come in basically whenever you need a CPO or a CPO, and we help you out. And so these sessions we like to say are like the big common tech mistakes that people see. But the reality of it is that we're really just using this session as a way to do a big Q&A session or a big tech therapy session for everybody. So we're going to start out with, here are some problems that we commonly see across lots of our clients. But we're really just using those as a like a jumping off block to get everybody thinking about the problems that they have within their business. And then please feel free to like type up to say, you know, I've seen this, but in this kind of shape, and we can talk through that, and everybody will learn a little bit, hopefully. And Roger's done some screen sharing, brilliant. So yeah, a little bit about us on the first slide. If you want to go on, Rog.
Yep, 2 seconds.
Cool. So yeah.
God. There we go.
Yeah. So bit about us. So there's myself and Roger and a bunch of our partners. From my perspective, I have some history with Just Eat, which is where I met Roger actually. And I ran Just Eat's UK technology. Yeah, they're UK technology essentially. And then I moved on and I was the CTO at Busu, which a lot of you may know as a language learning company in London. And they had a big exit last year. And then I'll let Roger intro himself.
Hi, I'm Roger, CTO and co-founder at Rational, and also my background similar to Rob's. We both met at Just Eat. I was looking after their international markets, so got 7 different countries across Europe, building their technology stack and teams there, but also have a background in sort of finance, came from a pension organization, then via digital marketing, Vodafone, and then spent a bunch of time with an organization called Riverford, which is a deeply integrated agriculture organization, and that gave me a weird set of experiences. So if anyone wants to talk about carrots, I can talk about those as much as I can talk about anything else.
Nice. So if we go on to the next slide, just a little bit about the session. Like I said, we're going to try and use that, use the session as a kind of free therapy call, essentially. The questions that you have will be the same questions that other people have. So asking them will help everybody to learn. And what we would say is we want to maintain the usual standard of confidentiality that we would expect from founders. You know, we're going to talk about some stuff going on in people's businesses, and let's not go and talk about those things elsewhere. So I'm not even going to call it the Chatham House rule. I'm going to like make it a bit of an extended thing, just to give us a bit of safety. So do share the challenges. Also, as a little bit of an icebreaker, maybe if people want to pop into the chat the kind of size of their tech and product function right now, or the size of the biggest tech and product function they've had issues with, that'd be really interesting information. I see we already have one question, which is a demand for carrot fact, which is backed up by a very, very nice rabbit MQ joke, which I really like. So that's very impressive already.
I just misspelled the word carrot. So
maybe that's the fact. Really spelled with one R.
Cool. So let's start with some of the things that we typically see in clients and different engagements. So we have a big list of things, and we're going to put them up on screen just as a way to get people starting to think about things. And maybe if people have a particular interest in one thing, then they can raise their hand or put it into the chat. Or if you have a thought or a thing that you want to share, also throw it into the chat, and I'll try and pick people out. But Rod, do you want to kick us off with the first one, which is building instead of buying?
So I've put a bunch of these on a single slide. So, mostly please use them as a prompt. If, as Rob said, if anyone's got any ideas or things they want to talk about, some of them might hit these topics, or otherwise, then let's do so. I'll just carry on until Rob stops me and asks me to answer a question. So I'll talk about building versus buying. So we see it absolutely all the time. And we think that it's one of the most expensive mistakes that organizations, especially founding organizations, small organizations, make. So it's really exciting to build a technology team. It's really exciting to get that technology team to build things. And there is a common situation where a combination of a founder being excited about their difference from the common sort of competitors, and also engineers and their love for building things, leads almost instantly to a dismissal of everything that's ever been built beforehand. And so what we find extremely commonly is a small tech team trying to build something very big or very complicated, or something that's been built 100 times before. The most obvious example of this is if you're in retail and you're trying to do essentially anything, but especially around sort of e-commerce, warehouse management, et cetera, et cetera. We see so frequently organizations building entire e-commerce stacks just because the way that their e-commerce works is ever so slightly different. So a great example of that, I'll use Riverford as an example because I've worked there for an awful long time. There's an organization that built an entire, very deep, very complicated e-commerce system for a problem which was essentially that they wanted per product subscriptions. And the right answer in their case should have been to find the best e-commerce system they could with the most features that felt appropriate and the value proposition that felt right, and then build on top of it. And what we're seeing now in the market, especially in that area, is that there are a couple of real runaway winners that give you so much value and the ability to extend them in such a way that you don't end up in a pickle. So historically, again, engineers like to engineer. What they'll tend to do is re-engineer even the thing that they bought. But the right answer, of course, is to minimize the amount of additional work that differentiates your product from everybody else's. So in that market right now, I would be recommending that we do a deep dive into Shopify, perhaps Shopify Plus, and then building systems that sit alongside that to give the user experience the augmentation that really matters, and then the backend experience can be dealt with because an order is an order, a line item is a line item is a line item, etc. A more specific example, maybe, because that's obviously like an entire segment of organizations, would be perhaps search. So again, the number of organizations that we go into who have their own deep, complex search stack, sitting on layers and layers of complex clusters in cloud environments, incredibly common, where actually what that organization is largely doing is taking a small number of things and making them searchable. And when you've got products like Algolia or hosted versions of Elasticsearch on the market, there is almost no chance that a small team of people will build a better search functionality than something like Algolia. And therefore, the right answer almost certainly has to be to buy. The common reason against it is those things are expensive. But the real challenge with that sort of position, the one that we see sort of the false economy of all over the place, is that engineering time costs an extremely large amount of money, and nobody ever quantifies it when they're doing the work. So we often get upset as founders when things are delayed because we see the opportunity being missed, and we sometimes can get irritated when we look at our budget and we think, well, that's a shame. That took that long in order to deliver that thing. Therefore, it's probably cost me sort of this scale of things. But we never seem to do very good jobs of that up front. And so how do we get around this sort of build versus buy approach? So we advocate a very, very simple thing. There's a load of different approaches to this, but one of the very simple approaches that we take in, a reasonable number of the smaller companies that we work with, is that we ask for what's called a one-pager. And a one-pager is really simply a business case. But the idea isn't for that business case to be a thorough documentation of the reasons why and why not. It's to trigger a conversation and a process of thinking about whether the alternative is viable and feasible. So instead of the default answer being, of course we can build that, it is, oh, okay, let's sit down, let's do a quick survey of the art of the possible on the market. So in that instance, let's pretend that it is search. Let's say that you have started a local newspaper aggregator. There you go, there's a random thing I've just come up with. And you want to be able to search across, Staffordshire news as well as, Hull news. What the right answer there is not to sit back and say, well, how do we build that? The right answer is, well, okay, what products are there on the market that we can shoehorn that functionality into that allows us to spend more time focusing on the things that differentiates us, which is never going to be search, or very, very unlikely to be search, as opposed to building out search. And in that instance, what I would expect is, a bit of context, not a lot, a bit of research. So 3 or 4, market leaders, and like this is literally like, half a day's Googling at most. And then a very, very short definition of what the complexity of building that thing might be. And that's the kind of thing that you would ask your tech team to do. Now they'll probably misestimate that entirely, but it almost doesn't matter because the scales, the orders of magnitude are so frequently so massive that building almost never works if there's a product on the market. So if your tech team is, only 3 people, that's still £300,000 a year, roughly, there and thereabouts. At which point, any kind of product that costs £1,000 a month is, blown into the long grass compared to building it yourself. And so, yeah, and so essentially we have these very small sheets. And the reason for that is not to answer the question, but to trigger the conversation amongst the group of people who would be making the decision to have the conversation in the first place. Because very, very typically the answer is buy as opposed to build. Yeah, so that's probably number one. And we see that. Yeah. We've seen that be an existential threat to multiple businesses. One of the organizations I'm working with at the moment has spent 4 years building something that they should have bought. And it is not a key differentiator in that market at all.
So we've already got a bunch of questions in the chat. That's awesome. Does anyone have any specific questions about this topic before we start getting into other people's specific questions?
Can I ask a quick question if no one's got one?
Yeah. Hey, Abby.
Hi. Hey, how are you? Good to see you. Good. So as part of the build versus buy, I wonder what everyone thinks around like the AI space at the moment. Obviously, I'm the CEO, I'm not the CTO, but me and my CTO are always like, how do we stay ahead of what's going on within our space? We use NLP, and he's really good at the whole buying, not building in the first instance, looking for the right tool for the job. Great. But obviously I'm defensibility over time, IP, all these fun things. How do you then see that as the business matures? Is it just hey, initially we're going to use the right tool for the job, but we obviously also need a wider strategy that's going to help build our own technical IP over time, right? So how do you think about that? Is that about right, or am I, missing something now?
No, so I think that's super valid, right? How do you build IP in the organization if what we're doing is basically buying things and sticking them together? So part of the question, I think, is what is genuinely your IP? So if your organization is a property company and you do property discovery, no one is buying your business because you built a search system, or probably, maybe, this depends how you go on this, your AI thing, especially if that AI thing is basically just a thin wrapper around ChatGPT. Which at the moment, let's be frank, everything is a thin wrapper around ChatGPT or one of the, Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, right? So the majority of the perception of IP is not real. And when we do due diligences, one of the things that we cut through is that for the investor. Yeah. So we will simply say, and me and Rob have both done big due diligences where we've gone into an organization who claim to have AI famously, and we'll go, well, actually what they're doing is they're using an off-the-shelf BERT model. That's not their IP, but they're claiming it is. Now and that's very easy to see in a due diligence process. So from the point of view of building internal IP, I would be focusing on exactly the strategy I've just talked about, which is find items that you can buy off the shelf and put them into your organization, because that means that you can free up the money and the time's the real one, right? The time and the resources to build genuine IP in your organization. Now that IP might be technical, it might not be technical, but either way, that's going to be worth an awful lot more than sort of misaligned IP, which your purchaser probably isn't going to buy your business for. At the same time, what I would also advocate for as you grow is this idea of going back for efficiency reasons. So if, for instance, you adopt something like, let's say you adopt Algolia as your searching thing. Now, Algolia is really cheap when it's small and it's super expensive when it's big. You might get to a scale of your usage of that thing where that becomes a serious line item in your organization. There comes a point where saying, well, okay, the value proposition has gone from being, we don't have enough resources to deliver that and all our features, to actually reducing our overheads, implementing efficiency and gaining additional flexibility is worth the trade-off. The problem is that people choose that trade-off really early in the cycle, as opposed to going in, running fast, building a load of stuff, getting product fit, using off-the-shelf components, and then coming back for the money, essentially. And that's the approach that we advocate. So focus all your attention on building real IP, and that can be R&D otherwise. And patents, for instance, great way of building real, genuine, protectable IP in your organization. And then focus on the efficiency sort of back direction.
Perfect, thank you. Super helpful.
Cool. Yeah, great question. Anyone else have any other questions or thoughts or experiences of building versus buying, or buying versus building?
Well, I think that there's a great one in here about moving to low code.
Yeah.
So interestingly, this is actually exactly what we would advocate, right? So low code and no code are brilliant ways of building your first prototype, and I would stay with them until they don't work. Now, that's probably too late. So before you ideally want to identify when they're not going to work and give yourself time to get off them, right? But essentially, a lot of these systems are vastly more complex than they appear. And actually, the low code and no code world actually makes that typical observation of this is easy, it will only take a small time to replace, even easier to fall down, that fallacy, because the whole proposition of those organizations is to hide from you all of the complexity. So Zapier, for instance, who's being the very obvious example, you can go into Zapier and within a few hours build an entire business if you pull together the right things. If you try to replace the bits that are in Zapier, what you've got to think about is how long it took Zapier to build those bits and to hide them from you. And the truth is that it took them that long. They're a pretty efficient organization. When it comes to migrating off a no-code system, therefore, I would highly recommend looking at your no-code system as your initial specification and building that out as essentially a spec for your build. The really nice part about that is that building a spec and keeping to a spec, which is actually one of the later points I think I put on that slide, is a really common issue in organizations. So it's really, really easy to either fall into the process of not putting any kind of thought ahead of time into what you want to build and running quickly under the belief that you'll work it out as you go along. Typically doesn't work quite like that. Or going the exact opposite way and pendulum swinging into sort of analysis paralysis, where you sit for hundreds of hours working out the spec of everything. And part of the reason that's driven by the engineers you have in your organization being one type of those people or another. They tend to be quite sort of bipolar in their approach, which is why you typically want someone fairly pragmatic to look at a solution like that for you. But essentially what we would advocate is working out what it is that your no-code environment is doing, identifying the bits that can't scale versus the bits that can continue to scale, and then focusing on the bits that need to scale out while leaving the rest of it in the no-code world. So there's almost no reason to pull your, I don't know, email notification stuff out of no-code. Not for a very long time. Until you're a very significant business, then you can solve that problem very easily. Similarly, if your system is triggering a bunch of behaviors based on, for instance, a new user sign up, it's reasonably unlikely in any real time frame that you're going to get to a point where you're getting so many new signups in such a short period of time that you need to scale out of any of these, you know, fairly large no-code systems. One of the big issues generally moving out of those sort of worlds is that, again, one of the things that people forget is that they are also hosting everything for you. So not only are they building it and making it maintained, but they're also making sure that it's up all the time. And so although we would never advocate, you know, build your entire organization on no code and stay there, that's probably naive. What we would do is we would advocate identifying the areas that do need to scale, that are a critical issue or a risk for your organization scaling in its predicted path, and then starting working on replacing those and integrating them into what's already there as soon as possible. And hopefully that makes sense.
Does that cover the question, Rob?
Yeah, it does. No, that's really useful on that side. I did want to follow up with one thing there. So exactly what you've said, what you've kind of said is what we've done. So we're a physical product business, but we've gone into the digital space and we've built a platform which allows online eye screening for employers through a no-code platform, and we've got product market fit now. And we're looking towards the future where, as you guys have kind of alluded to, investors will then identify, is there any IP within the business? And as you know, with no code, the code belongs to another company, whereas the algorithm and the UX and our logic kind of belongs to us. Well, that's the agreement we have with them anyway. But yeah, I guess a bit of clarification on the IP side of things. So our plan is to hit a certain sales volume and then try to build out from scratch, as you said, the points that need to be scaled up. But from an IP point of view, what do you want to demonstrate, I guess, when, you know, talking down the line to investors about, you know, this solution that we're building?
I don't know if you want to go, Rob, but my point of view would be that, you know, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a nerd, but when we've done a lot of due diligence for a lot of organizations, and we've seen a lot of, you know, these rounds going through, and we've advised around them. What no code is not some risk. Whenever we've done a due diligence, like the fact that some organization has got a bunch of stuff going on Zapier, we would write up as like, brilliant. They've done a normal thing. That sounds great. But with a, you know, this goes in the risk log. If they scale rapidly, this might be an area that needs focus. Or if they haven't thought through, like they're doing something in no code which requires security auditing or a specific type of due diligence, or it needs to be fast. I don't know what it needs, right? So it's really abstract how we're talking at the moment. If it's those things, then obviously no code isn't ideal. But if it's really asynchronous, it doesn't really matter very much. Then the biggest risk is like how it affects the user experience. If the user doesn't experience it, then like who cares how it's done behind the scenes? We all use Excel, don't we? Like that's like the killer no code app, and it's been around for about 40 years. So you know, the truth is, I don't think that it affects it too much. I would focus again on like what's the differentiating IP that your organization has, and it can be, you know, some kind of defensible part of how you do that scanning process. It could be that you have implemented a small part of your journey in a way that is hard for somebody else to replicate. You might be even be able to patent it or otherwise. but it's not the glue that investors buy, right? Like, or what, not that we ever see. What investors buy are your users, your traction, your visibility, and the nuggets of genuine innovation in your organization.
The way that I like to think about it is, if something that you have is easily replicable in no code, then there is no point in you trying to build that yourself, because whenever we go in there to look at it, we will basically just tell that acquirer or that investor, well, sure, they've spent 6 months building this thing out, and that's great, but that's not a defensible position, because someone could build it in no code in 2 weeks, right? And so there's a trap that you can fall into. We've done so much work and therefore we have a dependable position. But actually, if that work is just replicable very easily somewhere else, then you don't have a dependable position. And so if you look at it from that lens, then that puts into perspective where you really should be focusing some of those resources and where you should just be completely ignoring and leaving it be. And we personally, whenever we do these DDs, and we're not like the absolute be all and end all like on what a VC will think. Just to be clear, we are what we think. But taking practical solutions to something rather than going down a rabbit hole will get a bigger, tick from us. Whereas if you go down a rabbit hole and we know that you could have done it a different way and you could have saved yourself a bunch of time, that's actually just a red flag. Because then what else have you done that you've done taking the same approach on?
Awesome. No, that's really useful. Thanks, guys.
Brilliant. So next question from Martin. Martin, do you want to just kind of give context, or has your microphone fixed itself?
No,
it has not. No.
Okay, so I'll quickly summarize it. Martin's got a business well established, around 400 people. Tech team's about 150 to 280. That's a pretty substantial tech organization. The challenge is that product and tech have drifted apart. It's become a them versus us. Product feel that tech's slated to deliver, tech feel that product don't specify well enough. And within the squads, they get on well, but the leadership doesn't work. So my question to you, Martin, quickly would be, what's the structure there? Does product report into tech? Does tech report into product, or do both of them report into the board? Separate teams, so both separate all the way to the top. Yeah, okay. So approaches that we've seen, ultimately it's a people challenge, and a complex one at that. The reality is that once you have a breakdown in trust, it's very hard to get that back, right? So the approaches that we tend to look at is we try and identify what the root cause is. So is there a personality issue at the top? Is there a subtle messaging going on within those organizations from the leaders, so the CPO, the CTO, or whoever the VP, for instance, are, where messages are delivered in sort of a fairly adversarial way? We see that quite a lot. So there's an awful lot of technologists out there who, they get to the top of their tree and they say things like, "Oh, fucking hell, product." It's like or the product team go, "Oh, well, we would have hit all of our targets if it wasn't for tech not delivering," right? These are extremely common little phrases, but they are poison, right? They are a poison pill within those organizations, because if you see your leader talking like that about another part of the organization, it sort of gives you implicit permission to use that as an excuse or a scapegoat. In situations like that, we do quite a lot of mentoring, actually. We would spend, quite a lot of time with those two people, probably, both separate and together, to try and get them into a position where the message changes. It inverts from a them versus us between them. And what we try and foster, which is, initially fine, and then what we try and do is like unfoster it again, is a them versus us where they're a team and they're trying to deliver on the wider thing. So you basically put them both on the same boat, give them the paddle, and then let them learn how to row together. So that's a very sort of emotional and personally led process that we do. Now, sometimes that can involve things like 360s, because again, a lot of those organizations, all those people are unaware of their behavior and the way that it makes people feel. And so we find 360s, which are, a pretty common tool. They're a bit of a blunt instrument, but they tend to be underutilized, especially in tech leaders. Like there's a lot of tech leaders out there who are forgiven for having terrible communication skills, or forgiven for being like a bit of a nerd. And so those 360s give the conversation the ability to have the conversation around their ability to communicate and how they're communicating, how that's interpreted. So that's sort of one area that I would probably say works pretty well. And once you've changed the culture at the top, then that does tend to go down the ladder. And you can use all the traditional management approaches. So, give those people the responsibility for fixing it by writing a behavioral manual that they have to apply to themselves and the teams below them. And technologists tend to do well when they've got a script to work from, a little bit, like a bit of a pointer in the right direction. Another area that we spend a bit of time on is more with the wider team. So we typically deploy matrices into businesses. That sounds ridiculous, but what it basically is an Excel document with a bunch of tabs down the bottom, where each tab is a different role within the single contributor career path. And what we do is we have lists of expected capabilities and behaviors, with and behaviors being the most important part. And so what we then do is we give everybody in the whole team, and in this instance both teams, visibility of the expectations of each person moving on and progressing. And what we do is we try and leverage or gamify the fact that everyone's ambitious and wants the next role up to fix their own problem. And so what we'll have in that instance is we would explicitly add some additional requirements into each one of those things about working well with product and working well with tech and enabling and, et cetera, et cetera. And the idea there is the opposite, it's the bottom-up approach. Because if you're going to your manager and you're really want to progress as an individual, you're saying, how do I progress? And they're saying, oh, well, just be better at your job. It's totally unactionable. So if we give the manager the capability, a document to support them in giving a message, which is actually, this is a list of things that I'm looking for. This is how you're currently doing on that list of things. 3 of those things are very explicitly about fixing this problem. They will then naturally start adopting that. And it's very weird for a manager to ask a bunch of people how to improve the communication with product without then doing at least something themselves. And so you get a bottom up. And so what we would do typically there is sort of both of those things. And then the third thing probably would be around structure in general. So it would be, how are those teams interacting? What is the interaction point and how does that flow through the organization? So, is it the case that your organization builds everything from a product point of view first without engaging the engineering team, and then everything's given to the engineering team and it becomes a sort of them versus us flow through the organization to get things live, in which case that's sort of a seed for that sort of behavior? And if that is the case, we would seek to work out a way of integrating those 2 teams throughout that process. So you start doing things like cross-department Amigo teams. So there's a thing called 3 Amigos. It's if you Google it, it's pretty easy. But 3 Amigos is basically, how do I solve this problem? A small number of people go off, work out, come back, tell the team, right? You can do that across teams, which works, I think, really, really well. So you get like a product person, a couple of techs in there, a couple of product people, go and work out how to solve that problem. And within that little ecosystem, they make friends. And also they solve the problem better because they're thinking about both sides of the story. The challenge when you get big is that you get momentum in behaviors in those teams. And so you can pull it back down to a small team again, using something like a bastardized version of 3 Amigos process. But yeah, that's how I approach it.
Yeah, and it sounds like the teams are doing reasonably well, Martin, but like your leaders are not really like interacting in the right way. And so I'd really be thinking about what the relationship between those 2 are. and how you can kind of strengthen that. And, you know, you've got a CTO and CPO, maybe they have forgotten that their primary team is the leadership team, not their like team that they're trying to defend within the business. And so whilst they're trying to like frankly defend the fact that, you know, they can deliver or they're not getting something from this other team, you need to instead take it up a level and go, okay, you guys are responsible for the delivery of this business, not necessarily for like the delivery within your team. How are your teams contributing to the delivery in the business? How are they shipping? To make sure that that happens, and you two need to go away and you need to figure out how to be able to actually deliver together, because that's your job to do, which is a really, really blunt instrument to take. Like go away, figure out your job. But like maybe they have forgotten that, maybe they've forgotten the wood for the trees type of thing. And I was finding having that really key like close relationship between those two is what will fix it. And that's certainly what I had at Busu, for example. Like the head of product at Busu, or the guy who was head of product at Busu, who's left now, is still one of my best friends, because we spent all day, every day together, like figuring out how to deliver. And that relationship, I think, is going to be pretty important. Does anyone else have anything to add on that topic, or any thoughts, any experiences? Abby?
I'm sorry, I don't want to hug it, but it's adjacent to that, in the sense of like it's the other way around, and it's actually more maybe advice for me, as in typical CEO definitely sell things that we haven't built yet. They know I do it, we've agreement we can, but how do we get, you know, better at, like, I think this week, like I thought what I was selling, we already had more built than what we actually have built. So it's basically exactly the same product, but there's a new, you know, customer profile that's much bigger than what we were currently servicing, and then there are some like features that need to be adjusted for that. And one customer's moved really quickly, and then when we were in due diligence with this customer, when I actually dug in with the team, it's all sort of gone up in arms, because actually most of this, I've gone to go do a demo, and actually like there wasn't as much there as much I thought. So there's just, so it's like, is there like anything I can be doing, or we can be doing as a team, between like myself, product and tech, to make sure that this doesn't happen as often? Or is this just happen when you're getting product market fit, and anything we can do is sort of respond? It's like the difference between like being super scrappy and just getting stuff done, and you know, building things that are actually someone's willing to pay for, versus making sure that the team are not like totally burnt out because I've just given them like way more work, and they're like, cool, so what extra budget do you have? I was like, well, there isn't that at the moment, baby. Tell me how much it costs. I mean, you know what I mean? So it's like the whole like, you know, chicken and egg. I don't know if there's like any tips you've seen work well, or if it's just, this is it happens.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, it just happens, right? Roger might have a slightly different opinion, but for me, it just happens. And I think at the stage of business that you folks are at, then it's natural. The biggest problem comes whenever you get people's backs up because they don't know that it's going to happen, or you know, you're massively over-promising. So for me, it's all about like being honest with the team of like, this is the reality of where we are in business, that sometimes I need to go out and like sell things that are not necessarily there just yet. And that will open up a conversation of, okay, well, if you try to sell X, then that's fine, we would be able to do that. If you try to sell Y, then you're going to completely screw us. And so surfacing that like level of information and risk, I think probably is half the battle from my perspective. And just being able to like talk about it a lot means that you will have those conversations, so that you'll be better prepared for whenever you do go out there and talk to people. Rog, do you have anything quickly to add? I know Ian wants to get through a bunch more of the challenges. Ian, if you have a specific challenge you want to get through, then put it in the chat, because we're going to run out of time. Yeah, happy to go to a specific one, Ian, if there is one. Abby, so the only thing, well, I could add a bunch. So I've had to deal with this a lot. So it's super common, really, really common. But there are things that you can do to improve it. Specifically I use this thing called contracting. I don't know if anyone's ever done contracting before, but contracting is basically where you all sit in a room and you agree to a set of rules.
Typically, you do it before like a day's meeting where you tell each other who you hate and who you love. But I use it in business to have a very explicit conversation about something that's a bit awkward, which is this. And so one way of approaching this is agreeing what can change and what can't, and having that set in stone. And so typically where that would end up is you don't change the sprint. So your devs will work in a sprint probably, it's probably about 2 weeks. You shouldn't change the sprint. And if I was your CTO, I'd come in and say, please God, don't change their sprint, right? Change the sprint afterwards, fine, you know, but don't change their sprint. Partly because that wrecks what they're doing today, and it means that they can't really plan and they can't do anything. And when you're also probably judging them on the output of that sprint, you're sort of tripping them up in their own hurdle race, right? Like they're already jumping over hurdles, don't trip them up too. But there's nothing wrong with saying, oh, well, next sprint, we're going to, you know, have different shaped hurdles because they haven't started it yet. The second part is don't give them, especially tech, but this applies to the wider concept of tech and product, right? Don't ask them to deliver things that haven't got any real understanding or spec. And this sort of falls into one that goes later here, like expecting technologists to understand the rigors of compliance, right? That's a really common one we see, but actually it goes to don't expect your engineers, technologists to understand any complex area that they don't already know. It's a really common sort of thing that as a domain expert, probably as the founder of your organization, you will know a bunch of stuff that they do not know. And you can either spend the rest of your life trying to find the one product manager in the world who also knows what you do, or, which by the way is like not necessarily the best way of finding the best person, or you give them the understanding that they don't know that, and you either put other people into the place so that they can have an expert internal consult or external consult, or you give them the time to learn that. And so why is that relevant in this particular instance? I would say it's relevant because if you are giving them the freedom to work within their sprint, but changing their next sprint and openly saying, listen, that's how it's going to be, but I will respect your sprint if you allow me to change that. So you've got an agreement in place. And also when you put things into next sprint, it isn't just, we need a chat feature. Like it's got to be, you know, or it could be like really niche and specific. So I work a lot in education sometimes, and it could be that the system has to deal with level 3+ support for education. And no one in this room probably knows what I've just said. They feel like that when things like that drop into their sprint. And so ideally what you want to do is give them respect, both directions, and you give them enough information so that they either can work on it, or you give them enough time to go away and learn how to work on it. I would say that both of those things make the biggest issues of sort of rapid change more sort of edible.
Thank you.
I have better answers than that, but I'm aware of time.
That's great, thank you.
So unless Ian's put one through. No, okay. So what I'm going to jump to quickly is overhiring juniors, because it's a personal pet peeve, and I'll let Rob jump into his personal pet peeve next, as quickly as I can. So please don't hire juniors. Your businesses aren't big enough, typically. So I would pitch to all of you that junior engineers are an altruistic decision. They're brilliant. We should all do it. It's great. It's great for our economy. It's great for our people. It's good to bring people on. Fabulous. Don't do it when you're tiny. What you want, in my view, when you're very small, is a very small group of very good people. You, in a real, you know, I genuinely would pitch this to you every day of the week. If you had a team of 3 who were good, solid senior engineers, they will do 10 times more than a team of 10 junior developers, for all kinds of reasons. 1, they're self-directed. 2, they make fewer mistakes. 3, they know what they're trying to solve. 4, they ask you the questions that enables them to deliver on what they think you want, and they ask so that they work out what, you know, they minimize the distance between what they think you want and what you do want. But also they put in place appropriate things that stop them over engineering. Now, that's not always true, but a good senior engineer will. So falling into the trap of over-engineering is trivial. Every time you've worked in an organization or heard any organization using Kubernetes, unless they are the size of Just Eat, they've probably over-engineered something. It's a good signal normally. Or if they have a message queue, normally the sign of oh, goodness me, that's quite complicated. It's not always the case, but it's like a sign that, are you sure? Definitely you would want a pretty good reason for involving some of those big technology systems into your fairly small organization. Junior developers typically fall into that hole all the time because they're still learning, and they often are led or misled by exciting trends in technology. And if I read Hacker News every day and did what it said, or I went on the internet and read a bunch of tech blogs and did what it said, I also would over-engineer everything. What I do is I read those things and I go, that's fun. I'm pretty sure that's unnecessary, but let's get on with our day. And that, to me, that pragmatic approach to engineering is the most important sort of benefit you get from seniority. And juniors also ebb away time from seniors because they have to then mentor those people. So the belief that you can also have, like, I don't know, a couple of seniors and then a bunch of juniors, all you're really doing is eroding the benefit you're getting from the seniors by putting in with the juniors. That's a very strongly opinionated position I held, but it bore out of like a hell of a lot of experience of fixing that situation.
Yeah, we do like to have strong opinions. Sometimes loosely held. I saw Mike and his face as Roger went through that.
I did as well.
Yeah.
I feel like Mike might have a strong point on Kubernetes.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Or Mike is currently dealing with some Kubernetes in his business, and he's just realized, yeah, there we go. Okay. There we go. People's problems are not unique. So I'll jump in on my particular bug there for the last 2 minutes, which is underinvesting in technology maintenance. I don't know how many times we've come into businesses that have just completely, semi-understandably, but completely ignored doing technology maintenance for years at a time, which has caused them to get slower and slower over time because they have this, tech debt built up in their platform. And so the thing that I try to say to everybody is, please try to give your engineers some time to do tech debt. Like, it may not be things that directly impact your bottom line. It may not be things that directly impact your product. It may be things that you don't even understand, but ask them what they want to do, ask them what they're scared about the most, and just give them a percentage of time, 10%, 20%, whatever you can. Maybe not more than 20%. Because doing those things will help keep things clean, help keep things moving, help grease the wheels, and you will not necessarily be able to see a direct output of it because you can't disprove a negative, or you can't prove a negative, or whatever way it is. You can't show in a year the fact that you're slower or you're faster than you would have been if you hadn't done it. But trust me, you will be. And so just put the time in, just do some investment there. Hugely, hugely valuable, even if you don't realize it. So that's my semi rant over, but we only had 2 minutes, so I couldn't properly rant at you all.
Can I just ask? Thanks very much, Rob. On the tech debt and technology maintenance side, when you say it's very hard to see an obvious return from it, you can't disprove the negative. So I appreciate that. You were talking earlier about doing DD and tech DDs on potential acquisitions. Is that the point at which it might crystallize the value of having done good technology maintenance over the last few years? And if so, can you reverse engineer that into a case from the start for doing it well for the top management team?
So there will definitely be benefit to that. It's not the primary benefit that I think of whenever I'm thinking about that particular point, but there's definitely benefit because you get better marks on that DD score, right? So you have less things hanging around, a bit of a smell or a little bit of a worry for somebody. But the primary thing is the day-to-day speed improvement in what you can ship out. Right? Because typically what you see is you either see process is your problem in the ability to ship something, or your platform is the problem in ability to ship something because it takes you 3 times as long to develop the particular thing that you want to develop. And so that's the hidden cost and also the hidden benefit that you get.
Thanks very much.
So I think everyone probably has a next call to get to, but thank you all so much for this. This was super useful, I think, and some really, really great questions. I think we'll probably try to do some more of these because I think that they add some value for people. But if you have any feedback or anything, feel free to reach out to me, Roger, or AJ. Yeah, thank you all very much for coming.
There's our email address and our website. We're available to hire.
Thank you very much
Well,
indeed.
This is our job.
Yeah. We can
Thanks,
sort
guys.
it. Yeah. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Really love to meet
Thanks.
you.
Thanks very much.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
I'm reading the rest of the chat for anybody, like anyone that's saying. I'm trying to catch up on the chat while they're talking.
I'm just mildly battling with like sword fight, jousting maybe with Mike. It's enjoyable. I like because to me this is like what you want to do, right? Like to have the conversation about whether it is valid or not. That's like
no. What you said is exactly right. Most of the time, you need the simplest solution. And I've just gone through this. Shall I share quickly? Because it's I've literally just gone through this. So I over-engineered something in my company, WordTracker, because what I did was I went to a bare metal hosting company called Hetzner, which is brilliant. But it meant that I had to basically roll out the servers, keep them all up to date, make sure the patches were in there, and when servers died, I had to replace them. And all this would have been handled by just using a hosting company like Elastic itself. And part of me wishes I'd done that. And then I looked at the cost and it's like, oh, it's about 10 times more expensive than bare metal. Damn it. What's the solution? And the solution happens to be Kubernetes.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You know, the 10 times thing is always interesting. And whether that's a reasonable trade-off is always how I would try and work that business case through. You know, yes, it's 10 times more expensive. That feels wrong, doesn't it? Automatically, every part of, if you're like me, a bit northern, right? The idea of spending 10 times more on something that you don't have to spend 10 times more on.
Yeah.
But if it means that I get like a day back and the proportional cost difference is modest, and I then don't have the mental process of even thinking about it, and I can get on with the wider business.
Totally.
Oh, you know, and it's that zooming out that you sort of, you know, yes, Kube works great. For me, the challenge with Kube, and we are a bit opinionated about it, although I have you know, deal with it quite a bit, and it's all fine. And obviously, Kube is extraordinarily well engineered, it's very interesting technology, and it can do an awful lot of stuff. What we find is that it's typically put in place by people who want to solve one specific problem. So it might be clustering some Then what they do is we've got a cluster, so they start using it. That then becomes their approach. That then informs their approach. So instead of building a monolith, they then start building microservices because they've got Kubernetes. So that's probably how they should deploy on Kubernetes. So suddenly they've got a more complicated tech stack, a more complicated hosting stack, and they've set up Kubernetes by reading a blog post about how to set up Kubernetes, you know, mini kube, oh, it works, yay. And then one day at 3 a.m, something goes wrong.
Yeah.
They have no skills, no understanding, no capability to diagnose some, you know, Helm chart that's broken inside their kube cluster or some stray process. And now they've got this infrastructure that sort of demands they follow the Google way of solving problems and none of Google's expertise. And typically, I would say that to run your own Kube cluster, you probably want someone in your organization. And if you're a technical founder or you're a CTO, that could be you, right? Who could, if they tried, be a site reliability engineer at Google. You know, like, because those are the people who it was built for.
Yeah, fair enough. No,
Doesn't
that
mean
makes
you
it that
couldn't-
makes sense. Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you can't get away with it. It doesn't mean that it always breaks. In fact, it's a remarkable piece of software. It probably won't.
Yeah.
But the day that it does, like, how do you fix it?
Yeah. Well, I run into the same problem with the running the cluster I've done. So I basically use this thing called DevOps, rolling out in Debian. Everything gets rolled out nicely. But who the hell is going to fix that if I'm not around? I mean, it has fallen down. An SSL certificate fails or whatever, and I know exactly what to do. But that's just me. If I'm out of the organization, no one can fix it, which is a problem. Whereas if it was on Elastic Cloud with more expense, then it would have been easier.
Well, you sleep, don't you? You just don't worry about it. You
Yeah.
focus on the next day. The sleep that you got that night means that you win the deal tomorrow because you're not tired, because you didn't have to stay up until 4 a.m. in a hotel trying to work out how to solve a problem.
Totally.
You can't
Virtuous
just
Also-
spiral.
also
a
I think-
DevOps engineer. You know, like there's all the, you know, the hidden cost.
Also,
of
a thing that I really, a thing I really like to point out to people, like especially whenever you're using Hertzner, for example, is Hertzner had a fire like 2 or 3 years ago, one of their data centers, and the data center just disappeared. And
that was
like,
OVH, but yeah, similar situation, and could have happened.
oh, it was OVH? I thought it was Hertzner.
Did you just say AWS had a data center and everything disappeared?
OVH. They're a low cost. OVH. They're a
OVH.
It's just
European
another
low
low cost like
Yeah.
provider.
Like
Yeah.
Hertzner. They're very, very similar
Same.
organizations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, totally. I think I made a mistake in trying to get the lowest cost rather than zooming out, as you said. Sorry, I didn't catch your name, mate. It's Roja. Instead of zooming out and thinking what allows me to get on with the wider business, but pay a bit more and have the peace of mind. And that, I think you're spot on about that.
It's ultra don't beat yourself. Like, it's what we all do. We're founders, right? Like, we want to try and keep the runway long, and it's quite hard to zoom out and go, actually, I'm going to pay the extra £100 a month, £200 a month, £1,000 a month, whatever it could be.
Yeah.
Can I justify that?
Yeah,
And sometimes I try and do it in those instances with it, like one of my mental processes is a DevOps engineer. Because if I want to do it properly, I'm going to need somebody who knows how to solve it. DevOps engineer, you're not going to get a good one for less than 65, 70 grand.
That's right.
Therefore, like, my overspend on SaaS providers can cumulatively 70,000 quid before I even think about trying to work out how to bring it in house.
Got it. Yeah, you're absolutely
And if
right
you want
about
to,
that.
if you want to save some money and you don't want to go with the fully hosted solutions, just don't use Cube. Just stop using Kubernetes. Like, if there's nothing else that you do, just stop using Kubernetes. Like, there are a bunch of other like very easier things to do. Use GitHub Actions and like a fucking task runner and like throw some stuff on a box. Like, yeah.
Don't necessarily do that.
It
depends what you're using it for, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, I've found that Elastic Cloud's a bit too expensive, and I found bare metal is a bit too psychologically expensive. So Kubernetes on a with an Elastic thing they've already provided, sitting on a DigitalOcean or whatever Vulture, is a middle ground. I haven't actually implemented it yet, by the way. It's just the conclusion I reached, the balance between the two ends.
And it depends again how much you want to change it. Like, if running your own instance versus just running ES, I would be looking at who's the cheap ES third party.
Yeah, cheap ES third party. That's good. Yeah. Cool, man. Nice. That was a very interesting.
Like you're trying to ask something.
Say again.
Peter's being very well behaved. He's like,
yeah.
I was just going to say it was really interesting. It was a really interesting session.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah.
And it was quite validating as well. I think these are a lot of the things that I've seen in companies as well, but I haven't seen as many companies as you guys have seen. So it was very reassuring to hear a lot of your points.
Well, great. That's good to hear, because there were a bunch of technical people in the room, including yourself and Graham Hobson, and so I was like, oh shit, some people are going to call us out on.
No,
so I'm glad
I thought it was really good.
You were spot on. Yeah.
There were a couple of things that I was really pleased that you suggested that you really push people on low code. And on that, the other thing I've discovered over the years is that when you actually start building something in a business, figuring out what the process is, like figuring out what the business process is pretty thorny. And often there isn't a process, right? There's just somebody deals with something and they know what to do in each different circumstance. And so actually using the low code as a modeling tool, if nothing else, is very powerful, because like just getting to like you've got somebody who knows what to do to a formalized definition of what to do is quite a hard transition. And if you're doing that through the medium of real code, it's so slow. Whereas if you're doing it through low code, you can do it quickly.
Yeah, I mean, so I've used a few things. Obviously, Zapier is the 10,000 ton gorilla, but something called Pipe Dream, which is sort of in between, which is really good.
I'm literally about to ask what. I hate Zapier with passion. I loved it when it came out. I now hate it with a passion. I was wondering, like I'm playing with Make at the moment. I was wondering what you guys have been using.
Pipe Dream out. Pipe Dream is great. So Pipe Dream's for someone like me who wants to no code. It's low code, so I can use a bunch of its no code capabilities, and then whenever I want to, I can create a code runner in the middle of a flow, and it's just a function, right? Like it's just JavaScript. I think they do Python as well. You just do whatever the hell it is that you want to do, and then you carry on with their no code. But it allows me to very rapidly create my own no code blocks, essentially, that are super custom. And they can, you know, I've used it for everything from calling out to ChatGPT to parsing their responses into a JSON, which we all know is fun and dandy, to then passing it on to, for instance, reading emails out of an email account. I don't want to build an email account reading system if I can help it. What I want to do is use a block that polls and I don't care about it, and it creates an event and I get on with my life.
So is it basically code, Zapier with code, basically?
It's Zapier with code, right? And there's a bunch of other ones, like Node-RED is the one that you can host yourself. And there's one called N8 something, N8i or something like that. Something I can't remember. Yeah. They all come up. A lot of them are great. The beauty of Zapier is that there's so many people behind it and such a big organization behind it, it works. That's the other ones tend to be smaller organizations, and so some of the code blocks, when the system behind the scenes changes, there's a brittleness. Whereas Zapier is, because it's like fundamental to a lot of organizations' success, they tell them Zapier doesn't break, basically, whereas the others do. So I tend to bounce between them. And again, people get really stressed out about the cost of Zapier. Like, compared to, like, are you kidding me? It's free. But if what you want to do is send 10,000 emails, don't do a Zap for one, because that will be uneconomical, right? Like, so it's all about sort of the wider picture, right? Anyway.
Yeah, cool.
Out of interest, are you guys playing on any other low-code databases alongside Airtable? Are you finding anything? Because I find, again, I loved Airtable when I first hit it, but with all of these things, I find that they push the front of the curve way up, so you can do a lot of stuff very quickly, but getting beyond that point just kind of becomes asymptotic with these things.
Yeah, I like Superbase because it's just Postgres. So I'm a fully signed up Postgres nerd, right? Like 99.9% of all problems are solvable using Postgres, and I'm pretty sure another 0.9 is solvable by turning some of its functions on and understanding it better. And Superbase is just that, but with nice pre-built REST APIs. So straight away, what I can do is I can new up a Superbase. I can interact with it over GraphQL or REST API. I can write functions in it in JavaScript if I want to. I can talk to it directly from client side. So, you know, they've got a great SDK that I can just run queries. It's like really, you know, it's just the problem I find with some of the other guys, like what's the